We're glad that you've joined us today for our Social Action Day, and that is the Tennessee Valley District, United Methodist Women, and the Smoky Mountain District, United Methodist Women, are the host of our event today. I am the president of the Tennessee Valley District, United Methodist Women, Danielle Myers, and we're so glad that you've joined us from wherever you are today. We hope that you are blessed and enlightened by what you learned today. Before we pray, I have an announcement. You need to look carefully for a slide that you will see eventually that shows you the correct address to send a donation to Raising a Voice. It's going to be a P.O. box, so please keep that in mind. Their other address is just the street address, so please look for that P.O. box address to send a donation to them. And now let's bow our heads. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the rain that you sent us. If we have more rain today, help people to be safe out in the weather. Help us today to know how we can stop human trafficking, how we can help those impacted by human trafficking, and how we can show more love to one another. Guide us in all we do, and thank you for this opportunity today to learn. In Jesus' name, amen. And now I'm going to read from the prayer calendar. Today is the 22nd of August, and the mission focus is Tacoma Community House, Tacoma, Washington. Our missionary birthdays are Claudette Mora, David Makobo, and Nikshala. That's all. That's her name. I hope I pronounced it right. And now, wherever you are, please join us in our United Methodist Women purpose. United Methodist Women shall be a community of women whose purpose is to know God and to experience freedom as whole persons through Jesus Christ, to develop a creative, supportive fellowship, and to expand concepts of mission through participation in the global ministries of the church.
Good morning, everyone. We're so happy and delighted that we're able to have an event, even though it's not in person. You are enjoying it from the comfort of your home or as a small group, maybe in your church or in someone's home, but we're delighted that we're able to kick this event off today with the first annual joint event, hopefully annual joint event with the Tennessee Valley District. And I'm delighted today to introduce to you Katie and Will Boggs. They are with the foundation of Raising a Voice, which is located in Knoxville. And they are husband and wife. And Katie actually grew up in Maryville, Tennessee, and attended Fairview United Methodist Church. And Will grew up in Statesville, North Carolina, and he attended Broad Street United Methodist Church. They both met at the University of South Carolina while they were both pursuing their bachelor degrees in public relations and international business. Katie and Will started Raising a Voice in 2015, and they began their marriage with a one-year trip overseas to research the global injustice of human trafficking. Following their trip, they helped launch programs in Kenya and Argentina that remain with their organization still today. After their initial vision trip, they moved back to Knoxville for Katie to pursue her master's degree and for them to develop Raising a Voice. Now, Raising a Voice has a drop-in center in East Knoxville to serve women who have been abused, exploited, or have been in vulnerable situations. And they also plan to open a local coffee shop in their community, which has already happened. And as co-founder, Katie oversees Raising a Voice's local ministries, including outreach and the drop-in center. She also handles operations for Raising a Voice's coffee shop, which is called Likewise. She loves her job because she gets to be a part of something significant each and every day, and she loves seeing how Raising a Voice transforms people's lives. And then Will, her husband, who is also a co-founder, oversees how Raising a Voice develops and how the organization continues to grow their impact, both domestically here in Knoxville and also internationally. He loves his job because he gets to operate within brokenness and then eventually begin to see the restorative picture of people coming to know Jesus Christ, which transforms their lives. Will and Katie have seen God work in amazing and profound ways, and it's life-giving to them to see how he shows up in their lives and ministries each and every day. I welcome Katie and Will Boggs.
Thank you all for having us this morning. We miss seeing you in person, but we're just happy to be here and to be talking to you all virtually. It's kind of rainy Saturday, but we're excited to be here. Like we are introduced, we are Raising a Voice. We're based out of East Knoxville, Tennessee, and this is Will and I. Like Alice did such a great job introducing us. Raising a Voice has been in existence for about 5 years. Just short of the amount of time that Will and I have been married. So we've been doing this for a little bit now, and it's just been great to grow in ministry together and to grow in ministry with the women in our area and overseas as well.
Great. I'm a little bit taller than Katie, so I'm going to raise the mic a little bit. But yes, so to kind of introduce the heart of our ministry and our mission statement is ending human trafficking through gospel-centered community transformation and global outreach. And really when we share about Raising a Voice, our heart is really to address vulnerabilities that lead to exploitation by transforming communities in which these women exist. So often we're in conversations with people and the typical view is that women in prostitution are seen as failures. And what we like to share with people is that often these women are byproducts of a system that is constantly failing them. And so we see a lot of those injustices each and every day while we're operating in East Knoxville and overseas. Another big heart of ours that I hope that you see in the mission statement is gospel-centered. We really believe that the full picture of healing and the full picture of restoration and recovery that these women need in their lives doesn't come apart from having a faith in Jesus Christ. And so that's a huge focus of ours. It's something that we're not willing to compromise on, is sharing that our faith, which has been impacted in so many ways by the Methodist Church growing up, and helping them have a personal relationship with Jesus themselves. That's just such an important, integral aspect of what Raising a Voice does. We really try to embody work, live, and play in East Knoxville. So our whole life, where Katie and I live, is in East Knoxville. Our drop-in center is 3 blocks away from our house. Our office and our coffee shop that will be coming here shortly is only less than a mile away. So everything we do is in a very small area, really, that gives us so many unique opportunities to have impact into our community, impact the women that we serve.
So one of the biggest things that we talk about when we are talking about community transformation is how we can continue to grow and enable these women to also step up and impact their communities. The story of the woman at the well talking to Jesus is really popular in anti-trafficking organizations. We talk about it a lot, we reference it a lot. It's a great hope for many of us working in anti-trafficking. But what's so interesting is just later down in the story, you kind of revisit this woman, and I'll read this verse that we have, and it says, "They said to the woman, 'We no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world.'" And we use this verse as a lot of inspiration for what we do, because we don't want to just meet the woman at the well and give her things and talk to her. We want to then give her Jesus, introduce her to him, so then she can go out into her community and talk about Christ and prepare the way for Jesus to show up in her neighborhood, just because of what she said, what she's experienced, and her relationship with Christ. And so this is really important to us and how we look at that community transformation piece. It's not just Will and I going out and running the drop-in center or talking at outreach or any of those things. We're also trying to get the women to build true and lifelong relationships with Christ that will then impact their household and their neighbors and their community as well. So we're really looking at discipleship, making disciples, and bringing a true relationship with Jesus into the drop-in center with these women.
So our three core values of Raising a Voice, as you can see, is sustainable, relational, and radical. And I'll kind of walk through each of those points and why those were the three ones that we really wanted to emphasize. So with sustainable, we want to make sure that what we're doing, while we understand that God can radically change our world, change the lives of the women that we serve tomorrow, we also realize that this has been an issue. Human trafficking, the exploitation of women has been an issue for decades, centuries. So we want to make sure that what we do has the ability to be sustained, so that we can not only help address the women that are struggling and facing vulnerability and exploitation now, but also for generations to come. And that really connects back into that community transformation piece. A big thing for us is sustainability as well, and that's kind of one of the primary reasons that Likewise exists, which is our coffee shop, is to help sustain financially what we do, so that we can continue to have impact into our community, both in East Knoxville, but also overseas as well. Kind of the last point on sustainable is when these women are making a decision to change their lives, we want to make sure it's a change that can be sustained. We see that re-trafficking can be a large issue. From our experience, both locally and overseas, we can see that there are organizations that sometimes help these women, but if their support structure doesn't change, if the life behind it doesn't change, and just their situation changes, when you reintegrate them back into society, they still face the same vulnerabilities, which often can lead them to being re-exploited. So once they make a decision to change their life, they make a decision to move away from working in the sex industry, we want to make sure that change can be sustained. We want to make sure that it's a holistic change, that they're able to move into dignified employment in order to support themselves and their family. The core of Raising a Voice is being relational. Everything that we do in Kenya and in Argentina and in Knoxville that we'll share about here shortly, everything we do is relationally based. So all of our programs at their core, we're trying to invite people into a relationship with us and ultimately inviting people into a relationship with Christ. Because that's where true transformation happens. When you're living life side by side with people, that's when you can see transformation occur and be sustained. And then kind of one of the things that we really, pride ourselves on is being radical. Katie and I, when we set out on this journey and launched Raising a Voice, we really felt a calling and a push by the Lord into this ministry. And when we decided that we were going to be faithful and follow that calling, it was an agreement between us, like we are willing to sacrifice whatever we need to do in order to follow what God called us to do. And that we really think that a faith lived out well is one that is radical and transforms every aspect of your life. And so we really try to make sure that our organization represents that we want to be not only from our business, but also from our nonprofit, radical in the way that we operate and the way that we impact women, the way that we impact our community.
Yeah, and these are also really important to us because when you're working with women who are in prostitution, whether it's forced prostitution or a result of abuse or exploitation, that is how they are making their livelihood and usually making ends meet. So when I volunteered with people in drug addiction or homelessness or issues like that, they're spending all of their money and they're stealing to get money to feed these issues in their lives. Whereas we kind of are looking at it from the opposite side, where this is a huge issue in their life, but we have to actually take away their income stream to get them back on the right path. So we have to employ these radical and sustainable methods behind what we do so we don't lose women or scare them off or make their life not actually work for their goals, because they do need money, they have kids, they have families, they need to eat, and so we really try to take these and make it life applicable for the women that we work with. And so we'll kind of go into our 3 locations for Raising a Voice right now. Like we've kind of been talking about so far, we have our drop-in center in Knoxville, Tennessee. And so that's, like Will said, in East Knoxville. We're right off Cherry Street. And so here we are at kind of a day program for women just looking for resources and maybe questioning where they're at or in a bad situation and looking for someone to kind of be in their neighborhood and be in walking distance. And so that's kind of where we are. We're like the first step to a new life is how I see the drop-in center. And we'll go into that more in detail. But we also have Likewise Coffee in Knoxville, which Will said is our business wholly owned by Raising a Voice. And we're in our same neighborhood to provide some economic stimulation and growth and hire people that are our neighbors and just kind of be a safe beacon for people to meet and hang out and really invest into our community as well. Next, so we have 2 overseas locations in Argentina and Kenya, and they stemmed from our year overseas, our very first year of Raising a Voice. And the first one is our missionaries in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And so they run a safe house for women and their kids coming out of trafficked situations in Argentina. They are the only Christian safe house option in the country. So it's a beautiful ministry that is really, it's really tough, but it's such an amazing opportunity for the women to come out and to start a new life, and also for our missionaries to learn and grow and build relationships with these women as well. And then lastly, in Nairobi, Kenya, we have, they work with teenage head of household, young women, single moms that are at high risk or are currently being exploited through sex work or trafficking, or just in abusive situations. And so both in Argentina and Kenya, they do things like job training, social support, Bible studies, counseling, just all types of programs to get these women back on their feet, looking for Christ, and kind of being able to set goals and realize their potential and what build back what was taken away from them for so long.
So one of the things that we always focus, because we are locally based, is what is exploitation, what does human trafficking, what does prostitution in East Knoxville look like? In just in the United States as a generally speaking, looks very similar. So one of the things that we really work with and really try to do is help people understand a non-sensationalized version of human trafficking. There are obviously news stories that you hear and large injustices that are happening, but a lot of what happens with human trafficking might be more readily in your face than you might imagine. And so what we see a lot is many of the women that we serve have a history of sexual abuse. That they were often abused as minors, and that could be from someone that they maybe don't know, but it's often from a friend or a family member. And that just impacts the way that a woman views herself, the way that a woman views her body. And so that's something that a very high percentage of women that are in the situations that they're in, that we're serving, are facing some sort of history of sexual abuse.
Yeah, and that's a big conversation we have at the drop-in center a lot. And one reality that we had to face pretty early on when talking to the women is they say things like, if they have been sexually assaulted or repeatedly raped or things that are just terrible to hear about, they are in prostitution later in life because at that point they think someone is going to force them to have sex with a man, so they might as well make money off of it for themselves. And that's how a lot of them do end up in these sex work or prostitution situations, because of the mental toll and harassment they've experienced as a child or into their 20s even.
Yeah, so another one that we really see, another thing that's very prevalent, is drug addiction. And I don't think we will ever be able to, with our language, properly convey the amount of trauma that these women endure, the amount of trauma that they face. And so often they're using some type of substance in order to cope with that, in order to survive and make it another day in the type of life that they're facing. And so that's kind of something that we see happen very often. We also see, basically, when we share with people, one of the best ways to address the injustice of human trafficking is to create social support structures for people. So if a woman or a child disappears, that somebody notices, that somebody cares, that somebody is contacting the proper authorities so that that person can be found. And often victims of trafficking, they don't have those social support structures. They can disappear for 2-3 days and no one will call and no one will notice. And so as you're thinking about what does that look like for me, like just being a voice, building a relationship with children, building a relationship with women, and being there to support them, it's such an integral and crucial part of addressing the injustice of trafficking in your own area. And so what we often see is one of those vulnerabilities comes out of aging out of the foster care system. Very often these children, once they're aging out, they don't necessarily have the same social support structure that Katie and I maybe benefited from growing up, of having loving parents, having parents that are very involved in our lives, and having friends that really care and have our best interests in their mind and in their heart. And so what we see is a lot of people aging out of that foster care system and being put into a very vulnerable situation, not having some of those social support structures in place. So
yeah, and so what's interesting is family and friends ultimately impacts all of these touch points as well, because women can use drugs as a coping mechanism, but I mean, just last week, women were telling us that they, their boyfriends, or, whatever you want to call that relationship, it's not what we would imagine boyfriend and girlfriend to be like. Their boyfriend gets them addicted to drugs, so they will start prostituting, and so they will have to make money to get the drugs or to pay the boyfriend or the drug dealer. And it's family and friends that are supposed to be foster families to these kids, and that are not always keeping track of their location or if they're running away. And there are amazing foster families, but there are some that fall through the cracks and are just constantly getting moved from place to place to place. And eventually, once they disappear, no one's keeping track of them anymore. And
yeah. So maybe many of the women that we serve at the drop-in center, they're viewed as street prostitutes, and what that really means for them is that they're not necessarily able to prove themselves as a trafficking victim according to a legal framework. And so what often happens is they're being arrested for prostitution, for solicitation, and then they're getting a legal record, which just makes their opportunities more limited often. And so we are really trying to advocate for them. We see a lot of street prostitution out of desperation, honestly. Sometimes it's trading sex for rent. Sometimes it's trading sex for food. Sometimes it's trading sex for drugs. Especially the first two, food and rent. I mean, those are shelter and food are life necessities in order to survive and live. And so often they are trading their bodies and being in exploitative, vulnerable situations to survive. One of the things that we always like to emphasize is being in East Knoxville, there's a lot of need around us. And we want to make sure that they receive access to some of these social support systems that are in place in order to help them, that often they don't maybe know exist, or maybe they don't know how to go through that process. And so we help stand in that gap with them, to advocate for them so that they can receive affordable housing opportunities, so that they can receive education and job training opportunities, so that they can move forward with dignified employment. We really try to help promote healthy lifestyle as far as food goes. Those are all education disparity. Those are all issues that we're facing, and really trying to transform a community in which they live so that they can move forward and really be able to be in a situation where they can thrive.
So we've talked a lot about the drop-in center and how we got to this point, but then now we're going to talk about what we do. To get to the drop-in center in the first place, I will give a shout out to my home church, Fairview United Methodist. I grew up doing urban ministry with our church, with the youth choir, every summer, and a lot of times winter and spring. And starting at 12 years old, I was made known of things that can hurt an under-resourced area that's often in these urban centers. And so I grew up being comfortable going around, making relationships, and that is kind of the seed that initially started, 15 years ago to do this drop-in center. And then as we moved back to Knoxville from our year overseas and we're developing these international ministries, we just knew we needed to start something in Knoxville. We loved our city, we love the amazing things that happen here, and we're like, how can we create something that makes this city amazing for everyone? And how can we start lifting people up in our community so they can experience the richness of what life in East Tennessee can be like? And so we did a lot of research and conversations with other service providers, with police officers, with homeless ministries, just all types about what is missing. And so that's kind of how we got to this drop-in model. We volunteered at a lot of drop-in centers overseas. It's a pretty common model in a lot of other countries for women that are in prostitution or in exploitative situations to come to a day program and receive both short and long-term services. But it's really a low threshold entry point. A lot of these women, most of the women we serve are not homeless. They have unstable housing, but they're not usually sleeping, on the street or things like that. Or they have children. Usually they don't have custody of the children at this time, but they're keeping track of them, they're caring for them, they love them still, or they are taking care of family members, or there's a million reasons, and they're not ready to do a full overhaul of their life, to move into a shelter or move into a new part of town or admit what they're doing even. And so that's kind of how we got to this drop-in center. It's just a place. There's no requirements to come in at all. You just have to be a woman. And here you can just be loved on, and we can just start talking about things that maybe you want to see in your life that aren't happening right now. And so the first thing that we kind of address with women is immediate needs. We have a clothing closet, we have showers, they can do a load of laundry every day for 25 cents. We have snacks, hygiene products, makeup. We have a quiet room where they can take a nap, just offices, Bibles, Bible studies, all that kind of stuff. And so one of the things that we do is outreach as well. And so on usually weekend nights, we'll get a group, or if we have interns, staff, all that stuff, and we make hygiene bags and we stick our card in there. We just go out and talk to women that are working, go into the parking lots of the motels around where we know there's a lot of women prostituting. We know some of the local houses that have a lot of activity going on at them, and so we just hand out these hygiene bags and kind of just say like, hey, if you need clean socks, clean underwear, if you need a shower, this kind of stuff, like we're right down the road, we're within walking distance, we walk from the drop-in center. And so these are kind of the immediate needs that maybe a woman thinks, yeah, I could use a new shirt, or I need a load of laundry, or I need a quiet place, to make my phone call to DCS. And so that's kind of, we just start this relationship with them. And then after that, we kind of are learning about their story, where they're at, how they got here, and then we kind of start to build onto this case management role. We love so many of the organizations that already exist in Knoxville, and we don't want to do what they do when they're doing such a good job. But we need to make our women understand what is available to them, and so that is a huge part of what we do. Like I said, we're in walking distance, and just a lot of things aren't. And so for them to come here and we can kind of lay out all of their options about, where they can go if they need a pregnancy test, or if they need to file for child support or get their ID. We'll pay for one ID per woman. And that is something we're doing. I would say we're taking women weekly to theirs have been stolen. Usually 90% of the time it's been stolen. And without that ID, they can't get new housing, they can't get their food stamps, they can't register for things. And so that's a huge barrier that there's not a DMV within walking distance. And so we take them there, and it's such a quick process. And then we also allow women to get mail. And so that's kind of part of the case management. Is one thing that we learned maybe in the first month of having the drop-in center open is these women, like I said, they have unstable housing, and so they don't have a place to receive their mail. And if they do ask the owner or the person renting the house or whatever, hey, can I get my mail sent here, they usually have to pay them back in some type of drug or sexual favor, or just something that's so demeaning, just so they can receive mail, so they can receive their ID in the mail, so they can get their checks. And so that's a service we started allowing to be provided almost immediately, because that was a no-brainer that we didn't need women to be putting themselves in that position to get something mailed to them. And so that's a lot of what we do, is once they get that stuff mailed for them, they can start building on it, and they can start, making their life. And we search for long-term housing. We do a lot of rehab, helping them fill out paperwork, especially if they're on TennCare and Medicare, how we can navigate that and get them into these programs, and just in general connecting with local resources and allowing them to know what's out there and what they qualify for, especially. One of the first things that women lose when they're in an exploitative situation is the ability to dream and set goals. And so right away we start asking them that question, what do you want to do? What's your goal? What do you want to do tomorrow? What do you want to do next week? And just yesterday, we had a woman come back so we could kind of help her get an ID, but we've been working with her for maybe 2 months now. And we started out, she was working the streets in drugs, had a court case coming up. And so we just started going out and seeing her constantly on the street over and over again, telling her like, hey, come in, we'll keep talking to you out here, but why don't you come in? So finally she came in because she wanted a shower. She hadn't changed clothes in 4 days. And so from that, we started talking to her more and just learning her story and learning how she got here. And then we went with her to her court date, and we had been working with her and getting her clean, and both literally and figuratively, and got her clothes, appropriate court clothes. And just, they were like, her lawyer and the status check went so well because they felt like, hey, you are starting to turn your life around, and things are looking up for you. And now she's a week clean and she has full-time housing. And that's all stuff where I told Will, she was just spinning around in circles. She had been told by boyfriends her whole life that she was only good for sex. She was addicted to drugs that were given to her, that She just was trying to fit in and figure out who she was. And we just needed to grab her by the shoulders and say, we're here for you. Jesus is always here for you. Like, let's go down this path and see, what we can do and what you can do, because we believe in you. And that's a lot of what case management is just getting these women who are spinning around, just, grabbing them and being like, hey, like, we're here and you don't have to spin around for forever. And what can we do to get you on that path you want to be on? And I just love it. I love being at the drop-in center so much. And alongside of that is this, like I said, agape love. Is we're not just trying to point her to the path, but we're saying like, hey, we're gonna walk it with you. And like, we're gonna be there at the court. Sorry. We're gonna be there at court. We're gonna be there if you mess up. We're gonna visit you. We're gonna be here. We're open Mondays and Thursdays, completely open hours, and then by appointment. And so if you mess up one weekend, we'll still be there Monday morning at 9:30. We've had women laying in the grass when we've showed up. We've had them embarrassed. We've had people, all types of things. And all we have to do is say, we're still here. And your whole path isn't erased just because of one stumble. So let's keep going. And that's one of the beautiful things why Will keeps talking about us living so close to the drop-in center is it's actually kind of funny because we just have to tell them, we're your neighbors, so you can't escape us. Just a woman missed an appointment one afternoon, and we were all kind of bummed and working through like, okay, well, what are we gonna say? How are we gonna talk to her? And the next morning, we were driving just to the McDonald's to get our coffee, and we saw her walking down the street, and we just made a U-turn in the street, and we were yelling at her, and then she's, we're there, we're here, even when you don't come into the drop-in center, we're around, and that's such a important part of missional living and being really on the same page as these women. And we also, a lot of the women that we've started working with now want to go on outreach with us, and we say come on, and it's just so beautiful to actually be building relationships with women. And the drop-in center isn't fun always. We've had people say crazy things, and they come in, and urban ministry is often glamorized, and it's tough a lot of times. But part of the thing of when you're building boundaries and you're saying no, and we have strict rules at the drop-in center as well, and we have expectations for ourselves, for volunteers, for the women to come in, and that everyone needs to respect. And so creating these boundaries and starting to build healthy, Christ-centered relationships, I was looking at one of our interns and just thinking, like, these women, they're like my friends. They're real relationships that we're building. And yes, sometimes they come in and they just want to take 10 pairs of pants and go and never talk to you again and say, things like that. But, at the end of the day, they come back and they just want to be heard and loved and appreciated for the work that they have put in and what they're trying to do, and just the life that they've been trying to build. So that's kind of what we do at the drop-in center. It's kind of all-encompassing, but we just want to be low threshold. If women just want to come in, take a nap for an hour and leave, that's what they needed in that moment, and we were able to provide it. And we just have to trust that the more we show up, the more we're there, that 1 hour nap turns into, long-term housing, or getting her kids back, or, that she needed rest right in that moment to get up and take the hour and 15-minute bus ride to American Job Center to start that training, get her GED. And so that's just what we have to trust, is that Jesus is working, and that's why we invite him into every aspect of the drop-in center, because we cannot control what happens, and we can only do so much. And if I thought that I had to be in charge of every single one of these women and what they're doing, I would go crazy. So I guess that's kind of what we do at the drop-in center.
So I hope that you can hear how important relationships are to us. It is everything we do. It's not just a part of what we do. It's everything we do. These aren't just women we serve. These are women in our community. These are women that we love. These are women that we want to care for. We really try to shift people's perspective on how to view them, and really challenge them. Like, we always try to embody, we're never reaching down to reach these women. We're always reaching out. We're always operating in, all of us have in our human flawed nature brokenness. And they have brokenness that looks maybe very different from mine, or maybe very different from Katie's, but brokenness nonetheless. And so we never want to reach down and view them as, from our pedestal, we're looking down to help them up to where we are. We want to put ourselves on equal level with them and reach out to help them in their time of need, to help them with the struggles and the challenges that they're facing in our life, just like we have our friends and our family that are helping us in our struggles, helping us in our times of need and in the challenges we face. So relationships are just so important to what we do. They're everything we do. And one of the things that we like to also emphasize is these are women. They are women just like Katie. They're women just like many of you. And that's how we talk to them. We talk to them just like we would talk to anyone else, just with the same amount of respect, the same amount of dignity, the same amount of care. We want to bring a message of hope and love, because so many of their relationships don't bring that. One of the things that we always try to do is build trust. That's one of the biggest challenges that we face when we were initially launching the drop-in center into our area, is building trust. And I'll tell you, one of the great stories from COVID for us is, COVID has brought so many health concerns, so many vulnerabilities from people losing jobs, so many, loved ones passing away. It's impacted every aspect of society. And it's impacted our life and our ministry as well. But what we decided to do during COVID was we moved our drop-in center. We used to be leasing a space pretty much in the same neighborhood, about 2 blocks away from where we're located now. But we decided to buy a drop-in center. It's a house, looks just like probably many of the houses that you all live in, or that Katie and I live in. Because we want to emphasize we're going to be here long term. We're not just here to help you this month or next month. We're here to really live life with you. We're here to be here long term. And that perspective changed everything. The way that we talk to these women, they are mothers, they are daughters, they are friends, they have family members just like all of us, and we always want to emphasize that. Unfortunately, a lot of the relationships that they have are manipulative in nature. One of the big things that when we have people come on outreach, when we have people that are volunteering at the drop-in center, that we want to emphasize is we want you to represent what a healthy relationship looks like. A relationship of, I'm going to talk to you as my equal. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to hear your story, because it's important and there's value. Because so many of the relationships they have now are manipulative in nature. They're either being manipulated or they're trying to manipulate someone else to fulfill a need that they have. And we really intentionally try to have our volunteers just be there to listen, just be there to hear them, just be there to support them, just to provide encouragement for them, to be a beacon of hope and of love and of grace and acceptance, because they don't often see that. From a lot of their relationships are just transactional in nature. They are, you give me this, I'll give you that. And we really just want to share life with them. It's not an exchange. It's just, we are going to be here. We're going to be consistent. We're going to support you in whatever way we can.
You would with a friend. And that's what part of creating boundaries is. Like I said, we say no, and we know what we can do and what we can't do, and what we feel like is glorifying and what we feel like is maybe enabling. And these are rules that we stand pretty steadfast on. But what I see that is creating a healthy relationship. Many of them have never had a healthy relationship in their life. Either they're not allowed to say no in so many aspects, and they don't know how to tell other people no. And so if I have to be the first person to say no to them in the last 10 years, then that's the way it is. And sometimes they get mad and they leave, just like I do when someone tells me no for something I want. But I am trusting that this is, step one into, what is building something that's long-term. And that I tell our volunteers, if you don't want to tell them no, like, you can send them to me. I'll tell them no. But just like if your friend was coming in here, what would you want people to say and treat them with? Would you want them to just try to, do anything they can to, a lot of times it's good-hearted, but enable and allow them to continue and not challenge them and push them and seek Christ for them? Or would you want someone coming alongside your friend, setting a good example, pushing them towards Christ, letting them know that they can set their own personal boundaries as well? And so that's kind of one of the very first things we have to do. And I've yet to have a woman that I've said no to refuse to ever talk to me again. They come back, I see them on outreach. Like I said, they can't escape me. I see them at McDonald's, I see them down the street. And so it's that continual trust of like, I'm still, just because I told you no, but I'm still here and I'm still caring for you, and this is how I am caring for you and showing you something better. And the last thing is just thinking about how women think about themselves. And what's so hard is to think about, me as a woman, I have my own, issues with self-confidence and seeing myself as Christ sees me and all these things. And that's a huge thing we have to fight, because literally these women are being told, you're worth this many dollars to me, and this is how much I'm willing to pay for you, or this is how good I think you look. And that's what they're getting told every single day. And so how can I step in and say, that is not how Christ sees you? In the most corny way, Christ died for you. It's not in dollars. The value he sees in your life is not measurable in money. And so how can I show that to them? And that's why all of these things, it's low threshold. We let them come in, we love them, take showers, and, get dressed and feel clean and nice and confident. And these are all just tangible ways that we can speak Christ into their lives and say, hey, you look great and I want you to be confident, but no matter how you look, we love you and Jesus loves you and he knows what's in your heart. And that's not always reflected in your actions and how you look, but Christ sees past that and he knows past your reflection. One of the most sacred things is these women have street names a lot of times, and when a woman shares her real name with you, it's just such an opportunity. You are really to speak Christ into them and to hear who they are. And we just say this name that you picked is not who Jesus made you to be, and he knows your true self and he knows what you see. And so that's just a part of these relationships and what it looks like to be close to these women.
Yeah. As we start to wrap up here in the next 10 minutes or so, I think that what we want to emphasize is I don't want you to walk away just hearing what we do. I need you to hear how we do it. I need you to hear why we do it. We're very intentional about the way that we do things. Because that's where the power comes from. The power comes from being sacrificial. The power comes from being missional from every aspect of our life, from how we run our business to how we run our nonprofit, to the way we view these women, to where we live. we want you to, and that's why we spend so much time not necessarily saying what we do, which we're happy to share, but we want you to understand why we do it. We want you to understand how we do it. Like, we have spent years building this foundation so that we can long-term make this impact into the women in East Knoxville. We can make this impact into women in Kenya and in Argentina and other parts of the world. Like, we are very intentional about the way that we do things. So as we kind of start to wrap up, like I said, we wanted to share with you how we got the name for Raising a Voice and how we got the name for Likewise, which is our coffee shop. So I'll start with Likewise. Likewise comes from the story of the Good Samaritan. And we're in a low-income area that has so much to offer Knoxville. So it has so much to offer. We love our community. We love our neighborhood. We love our neighbors. We love the people that live there. And we want people to understand that it has so much to offer the city, and it faces a lot of prejudice. It faces a lot of perspective on what people see. And the name Likewise comes from the story of the Good Samaritan, when it says, at the end of the story, Jesus says, "Go and do likewise." And what we really want to emphasize and pour out is, when you come to Likewise, it's a safe space for you to have a good cup of coffee, to enjoy time alone, reading, working on homework, or having a meeting with friends, family, business meeting. But when you leave, we want you to go and do and be a good neighbor where you live, wherever that is. That's kind of the heart of Likewise, is investing into the community, but really challenging people to love their neighbors wherever that is, because that's what Jesus calls us to do. The name Raising a Voice really comes from kind of what this slide says, and it's so I'm specifically very passionate about this because I don't think it gets as much attention as it deserves. And so often we hear, give a voice to the voiceless. And what we challenge people to see is, like, these women that we serve have a voice. They have a story. They have things that they can share with you. They have a life. Like, they are not voiceless. You just have to be close enough to hear them. So Raising a Voice comes from, we want to be where we are serving, and to hear suppressed voices requires proximity. It requires you to be close to them. It requires you to be in relationship with them. And that's what we try to embody overseas where we serve. That's what we try to embody in East Knoxville. We want to hear their stories. We want to share it, and we want to help elevate their voices, raise their voice, so that others can hear the challenges they face, the life stories that they have, but also the amazing opportunities and blessings that they can be to their community and to their neighbors. And so as we kind of wrap up, there's a couple ways that, as you hear us and as we offer the opportunity to get involved, we always need people at the drop-in center. I want people to not only hear about human trafficking, but I want them to see it, because it'll change your perspective. It'll change everything about the way that you view it if you come see it. So we offer people the opportunity to come out and outreach, and it's a low threshold opportunity. It's not as daunting as it may sound. It's not as challenging as it may sound. It is literally going out on the street with some clear Ziploc plastic bags and saying, "Here, I care for you. Here is this bag," and it has our card in it. It has some very basic things that can help meet a need for them. Almost 100% of our women from the drop-in center come from outreach, come from us going out into the community and saying, "Hey, we're here for you. We care for you. Here's a bag right now, but these are some of the services we offer. Please feel free to come into the drop-in center."
Yeah, and volunteering at the drop-in center, I promise you'll laugh more than you cry. You'll probably do both, but it's only women, and so we take 18 and older women to work there, just because there are women showering and changing clothes, and there's a lot to unpack with them, a lot sometimes about previous hurts and relationships, and so it's a safe space where we don't invite men into, but outreach is for men and women. We love showing healthy male relationships, men of Christ, going out, all of us together, and just having good conversations and showing how people are different, and there is something about us and about these men that are different, and it's Jesus. And so that's why we allow both men and women, and anyone can come to outreach, but to volunteer at the drop-in center, it does require you to come to an hour training, just to go through, like I said, our rules and to understand expectations for when women come in there.
So from some of the needs that we have ongoing for the drop-in center is, like I said, we're handing out those plastic bags on outreach. Please come join us. We're always accepting women's clothing because we have a clothing closet in the drop-in center. We're always accepting hygiene products, so shampoo, soap, razors, deodorant is a big one. We always seem to need deodorant, and then we're always accepting cleaning supplies as well. We're very fortunate to be able in this season to hand out some COVID supplies in our area. That's something that a lot of the people in our area don't have the disposable income in order to buy gloves, masks, cleaning supplies to protect themselves and their family and their other loved ones as well. So that's something that we have the opportunity to do, and that's something that we'll continue to do moving forward, is providing those cleaning supplies. And just kind of the last thing is, we are a nonprofit, we are Christian-based, and we are not willing to compromise that. And so we really try to live sacrificially, and we would really appreciate people being able to give sacrificially to our ministry to sustain what we do and the relationships that we're building, both in East Knoxville and overseas. So we steward your money really well. It is a huge focus of ours to care for the money that you're making and that you're willing to share with us in order to make an impact. And so what we try to do is we always limit the amount of overhead we have, the amount of so much of your money. And I don't have a specific percentage to share with you off the top of my head, but so much of your money is going to creating this space and the opportunity to share and love on these women. So we thank you so much for having us, giving us the opportunity to speak. We look forward to here in a little bit being able to answer any questions that you all have. Feel free to visit our website as well. It's raisingavoice.org. If you have any questions that maybe you want to have a phone call with us or to send us via email that you think of down the road, there's a contact us form on our website. You can also email us at info@raisingavoice.org. We just thank you so much for having us here, and we really appreciate you all.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Our next speaker is not able to be here today. A co-worker in her office tested positive, so we had to punt, and she did her presentation. She taped it, so you will only hear her today and not see her, but she will still be part of the Q&A at the end. So don't forget, at the end of this presentation, we will take another break, and we'll have some music, and then we'll have questions at the end. So don't forget, look at the bottom of the screen, and there's a phone number that you can text your questions in for Katie and Will, and then our next speaker as well. Our next speaker is going to be Raina Zachariah, and she is with the Community Coalition Against Human Trafficking. Raina completed her bachelor's in human services with a minor in social work at East Tennessee State University. Before she earned her master's in public health, she moved to South Carolina. We have a theme going on here. That's where Katie and Will were from, where she worked as a mental health counselor and a preschool teacher. And during her graduate school, she worked at the Language and Culture Resource Center, where she coordinated the Corazon Latino Festival and the Hispanic Student Day at the local university. Before joining the Community Coalition Against Human Trafficking team, Raina worked at the Crisis Center as a community outreach specialist, where she discussed the prevalence of suicide, domestic violence, and sexual assault out in her community. She is also a suicide hotline trained, and she still assists with hotline calls on the weekends. Raina is passionate about helping others and knows that action can be created for compassion by collaborating and empowering one another. In her spare time, she loves to travel, watch The Office, and spend time with her family and friends. So help me to welcome Raina Zachariah.
Good morning, afternoon. My name is Raina Zachariah, and I am the community educator for the CCHT. I'm going to go ahead and apologize if you hear any barking or meowing. We've been working from home for the past 2 weeks, so hopefully you all can't hear this in the recording. But I wanted to take the opportunity to share some important information about human trafficking, particularly in East Tennessee, and how specifically you're going to see it in your work field or just out in the community. Some of you might already be familiar or informed about human trafficking, and that's great. Some of you might not, and that's still okay. I didn't either before starting this job. I don't anticipate that you're going to feel fully equipped or, just have all this information to know how to respond and recognize and respond to human trafficking. Each day is a learning experience. I really want to just put some things on your radar and inspire you and engage you to encourage you all to follow up and ask questions. I know it's challenging with this recording, but definitely feel free to email me or contact the CCHT for more information. So we'll get started. I think so. Here we go. So a little bit about us, who we are as an agency. We started about 10 years ago with a goal to bring awareness of human trafficking to the community. So we're about to celebrate our 10-year anniversary in October. We cover 33 counties in East Tennessee, pretty much from Chattanooga to Bristol, Tennessee. We believe that knowledge is power, and that by training and equipping primary responders and community members, we can create action to end modern day slavery. So we have trainings geared towards different professions. So if they come into contact with someone that might be potentially being trafficked, they're going to know how to recognize and respond to that person. So we have trainings for those healthcare professionals, legal professionals, direct service folks, community members, the hotel and real estate agent folks, truck stop managers, students. So we really try to make sure that we have all these trainings geared towards different professions. And if we don't, we always can modify it. On top of that, we have a locally focused task force that meets up monthly to discuss any sort of challenging cases we currently have and to actively support prosecution of traffickers, purchasers, and exploiters. So these monthly meetings really just address gaps in the community in regards to education and victim services needed. So we have people from TBI, FBI, other nonprofit agencies, direct care providers, DA's office, local law enforcement, all come together, once a month to discuss these cases and concerns. Last but not least, we work with survivors of human trafficking and offer a variety of direct services. So we currently have a safe house for adult survivors in Knoxville who identify as female, and provide them with any resources they need to heal. And we're in the process of getting a long-term safe house. So that's a little bit about us, who we are. If you're curious to know more about us, definitely head to our website. We're in the process of changing our name to Grow Free, but we still go by CCHT. So you can go to ccht.org or growfree.org. It'll take you to the same website. So before we go into the different types of trafficking, we really need to have a good understanding of what is human trafficking. So it's a violation of human rights, and it involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial act. This is a long, fancy definition from TBI of what sex trafficking is. We'll go into that in a second. But it's important to know when we're talking about all this in this training, that anyone is susceptible of being trafficked, because we all have vulnerabilities. And for our high-risk populations that we're going to talk about today, traffickers are going to know that those specific groups have more of a kind of immediate need for assistance. So it's important to know that. It's important to know that there's a lot of gray areas when we talk about, our cases and our clients. And I wanted to read a little line that a couple of days ago, our Director of Youth Services, superhero Lisa Bolton, had written a blog about kind of what we're seeing in social media now with Save the Children. And she said, traffickers don't have to conceal their identities behind a mask, and they don't have to hide their victims behind masks either. They already have the best cover up of all, that of a parent, that of a boyfriend. The relationship they've cultivated makes it easier for them and for their actions to fly under the radar. And that's what's become, and it's always become a challenge, is that, community is great and they're wanting to look out, protect the community, each other. But with human trafficking, there's been a lot of misconceptions and myths. So we need to debunk those and really know what, sex trafficking, human trafficking looks like, especially here in East Tennessee. So with sex trafficking, it occurs when someone uses force, fraud, or coercion to make someone engage in a sexual act, a commercial sex act, It's important to understand that it's not all black and white. There's different types of victimization. In our field of work, we have to be more on our toes of what we need to screen in and screen out. When we talk about commercial, or mean the word commercial, it's really meaning profit oriented. So we need to have a broad understanding of what that commercial act can look like. It could be money, it could be drugs, it could be a job opportunity, it could be healthcare for that person or for their child, it could be dental care, or it could be shelter. And that can make it challenging, for us to catch it happening in that act. That transaction might not happen right then and there for us to see those signs, which is why we say there are lots of gray areas. You're going to have to look at each situation case by case. That exchange is going to be extremely difficult to detect, and it's not going to present itself naturally. You're going to have to dig and investigate. Labor trafficking, we're not going to be talking about as much. It's still important. We're just not seeing it as frequently as sex trafficking. But it occurs when force, fraud, or coercion is used to make an individual work or provide services. This is TBI's long, fancy definition. This commonly occurs in labor contexts such as traveling sales crew, agricultural farms, restaurants, food service, landscaping, construction, factories, and housekeeping. So again, there's that force, fraud, or coercion going on, but it's subjecting that person to some sort of involuntary servitude. Like I said, it's harder to spot in the US. We have lots of laws that prevent it from happening. Demographic-wise, this is going to happen to someone who has come to the US to find a better job opportunity. This is going to kind of add that extra layer of fear when it comes to why they won't leave that situation, because the threats that trafficker has made. I'm going to call something to send overseas, then get sent back home, or get beaten. So they kind of just, it's hard for them to come and ask for help. International and national statistics, I don't this. This is a map from Polaris Project. They're a nonprofit, non-governmental agency, wonderful group. They collect data on human trafficking statistics in the U.S. So if you're wanting to look in your area and see, at least the reported cases, what's going on, you should definitely head to that website. They have lots of articles that you can read talking about those myths and misconceptions. And just great information. So great tool you all should go to, and if you're wanting to help or contribute. But this is a map from where they were getting their calls. So they're in charge of their human trafficking hotline. So as you can see, it's everywhere in the U.S., which breaks another misconception that it only happens overseas. So it's definitely happening in the U.S. We know that's underreported. You can check out Tennessee. We're pretty much covered. The red and orange areas are showing kind of where more of those more calls are coming from. Another misconception only happens in bigger cities. If it does happen in the U.S., it is happening in those bigger cities. It's also happening in rural areas. This is from 2017. Next slide is 2018. So you're seeing that the map is, covered with more colors. It's great that that this hotline is getting calls, because it's showing that people are seeing some sort of sign and indicator and reaching out for help, maybe seeing someone and wanting to help that person. But it's also showing that it's happening here. We definitely need to address this. This is a public health issue. So definitely check out that site for more information. But it's a growing problem. Excuse me. So TBI conducted this report back in 2011 with a follow-up in 2013. Counties with the highest prevalence of human trafficking were Shelby, Davison, Knox, and County. Like I said, this is back in 2013. 2011, Knox County reported more than 100 cases of human trafficking. I think so far we've had over 60, 70 clients. And according to TBI, human trafficking was reported in all 95 counties in 2019. So it's happening in every single county. Of course, it's underreported, even in those rural areas. I mean, that's kind of a perfect area to recruit or, scout for someone. I hate using those words, but that's what a trafficker does, is that they look for their next person that they're going to, talk to and develop that relationship, build that trust, because it's not stranger danger. It's not someone, popping out of the bush. It's not the community warning you see on Facebook that someone said so-and-so was following my daughter around TJ Maxx and they were driving this weird white van. They even tied a ribbon on her door handle. Is that something to be concerned of? Of course. Is that something to call the police? Of course. Is that what we're seeing with our human trafficking cases? Unfortunately, no. We are seeing that it is family members that are trafficking their kids. It is partners, boyfriends, girlfriends, spouses that are trafficking, their partners. So we want to debunk that myth that it's not stranger danger. It's not what we're seeing on social media with Wayfair and all that. I think it's, the initiative was great of just trying to bring awareness, but we want to, ground everyone and say that's not what we're seeing. That's not a good example. So we know what's happening. We know it's quite prevalent, but we need to know who should we be on the lookout. Trafficking, again, can happen to anyone, no matter the ethnicity, race, or social class. It's kind of like cancer, it knows no boundaries. But there definitely are some high-risk populations that we have to keep our eyes out on. Common aspect of these populations, these are a couple of examples, by the way, on the screen. Common aspect of these populations is that they are marginalized from society. So it's kind of indicative of that predatory nature of this crime. So traffickers exploit by their vulnerabilities. And what we're seeing again in East Tennessee is that it is familial trafficking, which is when a family member does it, or intimate partner trafficking. So it's not a stranger popping out of the bush. It's someone that they know, which can make it challenging, for us or law enforcement to, just we can't obviously question every single parent and every single partner, but there are definitely indicators and signs of someone that's being trafficked that we'll talk about in the next couple of slides. With kids, they're definitely in the high risk of being trafficked. Kids are vulnerable. Kids want to be loved. Kids in foster care and group homes, traffickers know that if a kid in foster care or group home disappears off the grid, they're unfortunately less likely to be checked on. Traffickers know that these kids want to be loved and needed, and that sometimes, going from one home to a foster home, it can be kind of a vicious cycle. It can be traumatizing, and those kids, when we're kids, we grow up, we're born to, be reliant and dependent on our adults or our guardians. So when they don't have that in their lives, they're constantly searching for it, and trafficker can come in and play that role of the parent, of the guardian, of the friend, to fill in that void, that vulnerability, and slowly groom that person. Runaways. So within 40 hours of a child running away, 1 out of 3 children will be approached by a trafficker, which is a scary number to think. And on the side, I always kind of bring up, when we talk about vulnerabilities, I'll take you all back to intro to psych class, Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? That pyramid. It's the 5 stages of human needs that motivate our behavior, right? So that bottom level in the pyramid are the physiological needs, right? Clothing, shelter, food. A lot of people on this list right here, also homeless people are at high risk. Homeless population, is at high risk. They don't have that. Second, above that physiological need level is safety. Again, a lot of people on this list don't have that sense of safety. And on top of that is love and belonging. So they don't have that bottom 3. The bottom 3 behavior. So it's easy for that trafficker to come in and manipulate their minds. They're kind of brainwashing them to think and do whatever they want them to do slowly, right? But promising them that love and that protection and that adventure and those physiological needs in order to get them to do whatever they want, right? So anyone with a vulnerability can be exploited. Anyone that was physically or sexually or emotionally abused is more at risk of being trafficked. Poverty is included as a risk factor because this type of exploitation involves that magic cure for more, right? Money, filling in, giving attention, whatever it is. It's easy for that trafficker to do that, to groom that individual. For traffickers, it would not be business smart to capture someone or kidnap someone outside of that TJ Maxx parking lot, because he knows someone will be asking about that missing person, that law enforcement will be looking for that person, and the victim themselves is going to be constantly trying to escape. So for the trafficker, it's smarter it's more business smart because they are scum, but they're business smart. They know who to lure or to groom. They're going to look for someone that's more vulnerable, that shows those vulnerabilities. So that's one myth that we want to debunk. It's not stranger danger. These traffickers build relationships with those trafficked individuals or with those victims, to where many times that victim doesn't even realize that they're being trafficked, right? It's normalized behavior for them. Excuse me. There's an older documentary called Chosen that shows real stories of individuals who are trafficked and how their trafficker lured them. If you all are interested in just kind of watching a documentary, I love watching the documentaries. They're easier to read articles. So that's something I'd recommend. So we know that it's happening. We know that there's definitely a high-risk population we have to keep our eyes out on. But how on earth is this thriving? One important thing to know is that when it comes to trafficking, these traffickers are lazy but are smart business people, right? Human trafficking is an incredibly profitable crime with a low risk of getting caught. So it's much easier to explain the presence of an individual rather than the presence of guns or drugs. So let's say I'm a bad person, driving in my car, and I'm about to sell me a couple of guns. Don't have proper, paperwork for it. So this is obviously an illegal activity. Cop pulls me over, the risk of getting caught, it's hard to hide those weapons, pretty large, a high risk, of getting caught. Rewards quite low because there's just a couple of, maybe 1 or 2 guns I'm selling if I don't get caught. If I am selling a couple, 20 bags of weed, risk of getting caught, kind of, in the middle, and reward is higher because I'm selling more than one item, selling maybe 20 bags, right? But when it comes to selling a human being, right? How many times can you sell a human? Also, do you think a law enforcement or an officer is going to, when they're pulling me over, question who this person in the car is with me? It could be my friend, it could be my partner, it could be my relative, it could be a coworker, right? So it's that perfect crime because no one's going to think, are you being trafficked? Of course not, right? Especially if that victim has been with that trafficker for many, many, many years. So they might be brainwashed. They might, be scared to say anything. They might be related to that person and don't want to get that person in trouble. So it can be very challenging to spot it happening. Reports show that victims are sold 20 to 40 times a day, 6 to 7 days a week. So it's incredibly profitable with that low risk of getting caught. A study in 2010 found that one pimp held a $500 daily quota for each of his 4 victims. So considering minimal overhead for those businesses, and he's obviously not putting this on his tax form, he's probably not filing taxes at all. This pimp roughly profited around $630,000 a year. Right. So there definitely, there's a demand, and I don't want to go on a tangent with that, but there is a demand. We don't have a surplus of victims saying, please traffic me. Right. We don't have women waking up or girls waking up, in the morning saying, I'm going to sell myself and I'm going to work horrible conditions. I'm going to get beaten by my trafficker. I'm going to get beaten by my buyer. I like this life. These individuals are lured into this horrible crime through, again, those promises of love and protection and buying them all these things at the very beginning. And either that victim feels like they are obligated to stay in that relationship. They're scared. They're scared that what society will think of them if they kind of admit that they were in this sticky situation. There are many reasons why they can't get out of the situation, but it's thriving because there are people out there that want to buy people for sex and that want to buy kids for sex. So we really need to, if we're going to be talking about how can we prevent this from happening, is how can we kind of go upstream and figure out, we need to address this mental health problem of people wanting to do this, right? But that's a different tangent. So that's why, unfortunately, it's thriving. There would be no money to be made if there was no demand. And unfortunately, there is a demand. There are many reasons why a trafficker might not be able to get out of the situation they're in, right? We talked about those vulnerabilities. Vulnerability is different for each person. It could be, a person with a disability. Maybe someone is having some issues paying for rent. Maybe that person just feels alone and isolated. And that's happening right now with COVID. Our high-risk population that's already vulnerable is even more vulnerable with all that's happening. Maybe that person went through a breakup. Maybe they had a death of a loved one, dropped out of school, kicked out of a parent's house, lost a job, right? Those are all traumatic experiences or stresses, negative pushes in their lives that are really out of their control, right? But here comes trafficker, being the savior, looking for that, that trafficker looks for that opportune moment to come in that person's life and fill in that void, fill in that need, right? And this is the moment where they look like they are the perfect partner, the hero, the good friend, the person who goes to your church and your family knows that everyone just thinks that person's great, right? They would never assume that because it's not stranger danger. It's someone that person knows and has developed, this trust or this relationship or whatever it is, but it's someone that they actually know. Many times that trafficked individual might not even realize they're being trafficked. Like I said, in East Tennessee, one of the most prevalent types of trafficking we see in those rural areas is familial trafficking and intimate partner trafficking. So familial trafficking is when a family member is trafficking their child. In many cases with familial trafficking, it's multi-generational, right? So mom was doing it, grandma's doing it, the whole family's aware of it, right? Here comes grandpa giving a pat on Sally's shoulder saying, hey kiddo, thanks for helping pay for rent, right? So it's normalized behavior, and it's very challenging whenever law enforcement, when we finally caught trafficker and getting that victim out of the situation, saying, hey, were you being trafficked? Or not obviously that sentence, but just, hey, was mommy doing this? Was daddy doing this? And they're like, no, that it's normalized behavior. It's something that they grew up doing, that she saw mom doing and grandma's still doing, whatever it is, but it's normalized behavior. Because of that force, fraud, or coercion, traffickers might have been convinced to lie for their own safety, right? They're stuck in that cycle for many reasons. And one of the biggest reasons is just, they're threatened, to be physically beaten or blackmailed. If you don't do this, I'm going to beat you. If you don't do this, I'm going to force our daughter to do this. So traffickers will put thoughts into the individuals that they traffic, saying that they can go to jail, maybe get slapped with a prostitution charge, maybe filing a false police report on them, or harming their loved ones. Lastly, they might feel loyal to that trafficker. Trauma bonds are exactly what they sound like. Do you all have a friend that is, was or is clearly in a toxic and unhealthy relationship, and you wonder, why are they staying with that person, right? It's really easy for us on the outside to recognize those signs of that toxic relationship, but that person in it sometimes genuinely cannot acknowledge they're in a bad situation. Trauma bonds occur when that trafficker repeats the cycle of abuse, whether it's emotionally, physically, or mentally, with that individual, which then fuels a need of validation and love from the person that's abusing them. So though, the victims kind of associate love with abuse. It's very similar to domestic violence, in general, the power control wheel, very similar with human trafficking. So not only does it happen in romantic relationships, but it also happens between colleagues and families and friends. So that trafficker will then condition the person that they're trafficking to believe that this relationship is completely normal, right? Normalized behavior, making it seem like everyone else, probably goes through it too. So, why am I complaining about this? And unfortunately, the longer they stay with that person, the person being abused will feel more and more like they need that validation from the abuser, right? Oh, he's doing this because he loves me, or he did this because, had I done this and shown that I loved him, he wouldn't have beaten me. We also talk a little bit about Stockholm syndrome when it comes to trauma bonds. Sorry, I'm having some bad allergies if you hear me sniffling. So Stockholm syndrome is common. We talk about that. It's a kind of a psychological condition in response to the trauma that that victim is exposed to. So the abused individual will then kind of sympathize with their abuse. So the trafficked individual will sympathize with the trafficker, right? They'll develop positive feelings towards the trafficker. And the abused and the trafficked individual, will develop negative feelings towards the police or authorities. So the trafficker will tell his victim, hey, I'm here to protect you. I'm the only one that cares about you. No one else cares about you. The police, they're pigs. They're just being this way. They want to take you away from me. They want to take you away from everything you have and your safety in your home. Screw them. So they will, brainwash them to think that anyone that is trying to get them out of the situation or take them away from their trafficker is bad. So many psychologists and medical professionals consider Stockholm syndrome to kind of be it's a coping mechanism for that victim, that their brain just kind of does that to protect itself. So those are a few examples of why the individual is stuck in that situation. Again, there's a lot of gray area, and it's important to kind of look at the situation case by case. Again, those are a couple of examples that I just talked about, but there's, a lot of other examples, especially here in the rural areas. Sometimes it's just people going into survival mode, right? No job, no income, no food, no shelter. Sometimes a parent might go into survival mode, and for her, and I'm not justifying this, but I'm just giving you an example, maybe mom would rather do this and traffic her daughter than have DCS come and separate her from her children. So, there's a lot of gray area. Does not mean that action is good, but that's just kind of the process. Excuse me. Medical complications, these victims are not going for their yearly physical. We don't go for our yearly physical. We know that stress takes a toll on the body, and that, if they're not sleeping well enough, they're just going to constantly feel like they're exhausted. They might have the bruises and the scarring from where the trafficker is beating them, or the John. So the John is the person that's purchasing them, so they might be beating them. They might be malnourished from where they're not eating. Maybe trafficker is using, this as, if you don't make your money, I'm not going to give you your candy bar for the day. Sexual abuse, we talk about medical complications. These girls, most of the time are not using protection. If they are, it's because traffickers charging them more for the commercial sex act, and of course unplanned pregnancy. The psychological abuse, they're going to go through PTSD. A lot of times, the physical and sexual abuse a lot of times goes away, right? We can give a medication, we can, put a cast on a broken bone. But the psychological abuse, sometimes it will never go away. PTSD will come and go, depression, trauma bonds are extremely hard to break, especially if that person, has really been in that relationship for many, many, many years. Suicide attempts, memory loss. So a lot of times, the brain, we talk about trauma, goes, to the fight, flight, or freeze mode. They're going to be in a haze and not remember things in a linear order when we are talking about, kind of the incident or, their life. They're going to have difficulties telling us what happened just because of, their brain was kind of in a haze at that moment. So more unique medical issues, chronic health. When you all were back in school and you were stressing over an exam, right? That whole week before, you weren't eating enough, you weren't sleeping enough. You're just constantly freaking out over this exam. And then as soon as you took your exam, what did you do? You crashed, right? You ate your favorite food, junk food, slept, watched Netflix, whatever you did, right? But you recuperated after that. And unfortunately, these girls don't have that leisure of relaxing. They're just constantly in this, cycle of anxiety and pain, which, just makes them feel like they're in this constant feeling of pain, of their body aching. They develop asthma, dental problems, maybe from where they're getting punched in the face by their trafficker, maybe when they're using some sort of substance. And of course, the last one uses the tattoos and branding. So traffickers know that, if someone in the community saw a tattoo like this, that they would judge that girl. Maybe they would label her as a hoe or a sex worker. And that's exactly what he wants people to think, because he knows that, 10, 15 years ago, people did not want to be, kind of avoid her. He's also, dehumanizing her by putting a tattoo on her, showing her that she's nothing more than a product. So that really goes into self-esteem of, they see a tattoo like this on their body every day. They're going to have that sense of hopelessness and helplessness of, I don't need this, or I'm never going to get out of this situation, right? It's a lost cause. Knowing some warning signs again, throughout this presentation, I know that you're kind of waiting for, all right, tell me what I need to know so I can be on the lookout, right? It's not all black and white, unfortunately. These are, some good warning signs, but, a trafficked individual might not even be showing any of these signs and still be trafficked. But these are just a good, some good general warning signs that we tell people to be on the lookout. They might, if it's a minor, they might say that they're older than what they actually are. Maybe that person started dating someone and quickly became isolated from their family and friends. Again, they're going to be fearful of authority figures, maybe inappropriately dressed where it's winter time and they're wearing summer attire and they're wearing that, like for 2 weeks without changing. They might have those bruises healing at different, phases, malnourished, not carrying a purse on them, no phone. If they do have a phone, maybe it's a prepaid phone. They're moving constantly from one place to another, maybe couch surfing at friends' places or living in motels with their boyfriends under the influence of drugs. Another misconception people think is that these individuals go into, sex working because they wanted to, right? Again, there's no one wakes up in the morning saying, hey, I want to be a sex worker, right? Large majority of prostitutes, sex workers, whatever you want to call them, have most likely been trafficked. They just kind of are stuck in that cycle, right? They didn't really have any other options and just thought, might as well just stay in the cycle. But people think that girls go into this because of drugs, right? Many of our clients have said that they were not even using any sort of substance until their trafficker got them addicted to the drugs, right? And kind of use it as blackmail. If you don't do this for me, you're not going to get your meth for the day. And if you withdraw quickly, it can be lethal. Kill you, right? A couple other additional warning signs, they might have controlled movements. Trafficker might be with them the whole time. A couple of weeks back, my executive director was telling me a story, because I always like to tell stories so that it can connect and make sense. She had done a training for some medical professionals at a hospital, and she was, on this page talking kind of how, and giving examples how, especially if they have a patient come in and boyfriend's always there and he's always speaking on her behalf, and she always kind of looks for him for approval, like saying yes or no. That might be a sign. So doctor had a patient come in. She was coming in pretty much every month or every other month with her boyfriend to get STD testing. And they would both get tests, and she'd always test positive and he'd always test negative. Now, in real life, if boyfriend and girlfriend were going and getting tested and it was every month and she tested positive and he tested negative, the boyfriend would be like, oh my gosh, who are you sleeping with? Or how did you get this, right? There'd be some sort of reaction. But the doctor was noticing that the boyfriend every time didn't show any reaction, and that the girlfriend was just kind of quiet. And every time he'd ask her a question, she'd look at her boyfriend and kind of, he nodded his head, that she can answer the question. So after seeing that, doctor called us and said, I think I have a client or a patient that might be being trafficked. And we were there to just kind of give him his resources and what the next step he could do. Again, they might be coached what to say, and they might be disoriented or confused just because of lack of sleep, just being exhausted, or being on some sort of substance. And real quick, back on the slide, victims, again, might not identify that they're being trafficked. They might not know that it's, a criminal, there's some sort of like doing something dangerous or illegal. They might feel stigmatized by that victimization. They might know that they're being trafficked, but they're just like, I don't want to be labeled as a victim. I don't want to be labeled as that girl. So I'll just kind of keep it my secret and just, stay quiet and silent about it. And again, they might be emotionally invested in that trafficker or scared of illegal consequences. So they're not going to have a clear picture of the situation they're in, especially when they're going to be seeing you guys. They're just going to be there probably because they need some sort of immediate assistance and not really anything else. So I don't like to use the word screening, but this is kind of, we want to encourage you all that if you are having a conversation with someone that is potentially being trafficked, or you have concerns, to have natural-led conversations, right? Just let it come out naturally. Hey, I noticed, I didn't see you at church last, or for the past couple months. How you been? I'm worried about you, right? It's okay to say that. But always, if you're noticing that they're in a situation where they're wearing the same clothes for a couple of weeks, or they look like they've just lost a lot of weight lately, what do they need right then and there? Have they slept? When was the last time they ate? When was the last time they showered or worn clothes that they're comfortable in, right? When you address those needs, you are building trust, right? You're showing that you care about that. You genuinely care about that person, and you're proving that trafficker wrong. He's told her all her life, no one cares about you. I care about you. I'll provide all this stuff for you, right? Consider the need for an interpreter. You never know. Ways of fostering trust. If you are in that environment where you have to step out of the office or wherever you're at, tell them, hey, I'll be right. I have to go do this A, B, and C, and then I'll be right back, rather than you saying, give me a few minutes, right? Because a few minutes for everybody is like 15, 20 minutes. But when you're transparent about it, saying, hey, I have to go get this paper from, the copier room, and, whatever it is, you're being honest with them, right? They're not feeling like that you're just like lying to them, like how trafficker told, her. I use this example, of when fostering trust. When I go to the doctor's office and they ask me a question, I hate when they ask me a question that's like a yes or no question, and I say, yes or no, and they start jotting things down for like 5 minutes. I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I say to get you to write that much, right? I start feeling insecure. I'm like, did I say something that made myself like look wrong or whatever it is? If you're in an environment where you have that capability, or you're supposed to be writing something down, tell them, hey, I'm going to be writing some things down if that's okay with you. And then after we're done, you can look at the notes and see if what I wrote is correct. Maybe I misinterpreted something or misunderstood something, and I can always fix it, right? So you're involving them in that conversation, and you're not making them feel like they're just like some sort of like specimen or product or anything, but they're a person and they can express their feelings, and that you're in a safe environment. If you're in a public area, ask them like, do you feel comfortable speaking here? Or would you like to go dimly lit where it's like it could be kind of scary and creepy? Maybe they prefer to sit in a corner where they know that no one's going to come up from behind them and grab them, right? Make it so that they choose where they want to sit. You know, if you're in a room, there's a couple of chairs, pick a place wherever you'd like to sit, right? They have that. It's their choice. It's their option. You know, asking, are you comfortable? Any of those ways. And lastly, maintaining patience and respect regarding to their history. These individuals are the most resilient people you will ever meet. That being said, they might be aggressive, they might be defensive, they might know what to say or do to upset you, to get them off of your radar, right? You have to be patient. You know, it's a lot of times you're gonna have to build that trust and have multiple conversations, multiple meetings for that person to, you know, slowly open up. Because again, traffickers told them, don't say anything, you're better off staying with me. All these lies that they fed into them. So you're gonna have to slowly peel back those layers, you know, on their terms, but with their consent to open up. These are a couple of examples we use for if you're wanting to, you know, when you're having these conversations, again, let it all come out naturally, right? Don't have the script, don't have a checklist. It's not going to make the conversation, you know, it's going to be very like just too business or professional like, right? Don't be afraid to ask, but be sensitive and patient. Build that trust. Remember, even if you get a negative or scripted answer, it might be beneficial for that individual to hear these questions and help them kind of start critically thinking about their circumstances. For example, you know, that tattoo, Ricky, let's say like, F you, pay me. Obviously, you don't want to be like, what a cool tattoo. And you also don't want to like, you know, gawk at it and just like stare at it. You could say, hey, I saw your tattoo, like, it looks fairly new. Did it hurt? How long did it take to get, right? You can even show them, hey, I got a really cool tattoo on my arm. Maybe it'll get them to open up. Or if it's like Ricky's hoe or something on their arm, you can be like, oh, that looks like a fairly new tattoo. You know, when did you get it done? Who's Ricky? Ricky's my boyfriend. Cool. Like, how long have we been together? Well, we've been together for about a month. Oh, okay. Sometimes, again, you know, her saying that they only been together for a month and getting a tattoo that soon might get those gears turning in your mind of saying, holy cow, that was too quick. I'm kind of in a bad situation. Maybe I should get some help, right? So those are just a couple of, you know, examples of what we use when we're doing that informal screening process to add in those questions to get them to open up more. Do you feel safe with when you're with Ricky? Does he take care of you good? And, you know, but he makes you like stay at home a lot. Can you leave whenever you want to? Those are questions, great examples of, you know, how to get that individual to open up. Just make sure you don't use like things like sex worker, terms of like sex worker or for coercion, excuse me, trafficking. Don't ask if they're being trafficked. Call girl or prostitute or hoe. That's going to kind of give you that negative response. So I always get this question of how can we prevent human trafficking, right? And these are just, I know, very like broad, you know, answers, but, you know, encouraging those healthy behaviors and conversations. I know some of you all have kids and worry. We talk about how kids are high risk of, you know, how can we protect our community, our kids, our family, having those conversations. We have to address, you know, that's happening, and then ways that we can prevent it. So when we're talking to our kids saying, hey, there are bad people out there that might, you know, try to like act like they're your friend. They might say this, they might do that. You know, if they don't know you that well and they start buying you really expensive things, be careful. That's not normal. You know, this is what human trafficking actually means. This is what they make people do. You know, we have to have those conversations in order to you know, to teach. Knowledge is power. And that's the first thing that we always say is have those conversations, you know, with your community, with your church group of saying human trafficking is happening. This is what it actually looks like. This is the population that we have to be on the lookout for. You know, we have a homeless population hanging out under the bridge. they're already in a really tough situation. What are some ways that we can help them grow, protect them, get them out of that situation, right? Again, like it kind of goes into fostering safe homes and neighborhoods. If you're noticing that your neighborhood is, you have a homeless population kind of hanging out nearby, and they're really sweet people, and you just kind of want to make sure that everyone is safe. What are some ways that you can have some events, some resources available for your neighborhood to help everyone out, and addressing those and identifying and addressing those vulnerabilities? Maybe you live in an area where it's rural and jobs are very low. How can we make sure that, if we need to have a food bank, we need to have an event every Saturday where everyone can get, these items to make sure that everyone's well fed, is another example. And just being a community advocate is really what we're trying to emphasize, is that, we have to be involved in the community as much as we can. It's everyone's problem. Not only, human trafficking is a public health issue, so we have to address this because it's not only affecting that individual, but it can affect anybody. It can affect the public. So those are a couple of ways that you can help prevent human trafficking and being an advocate. I always kind of use this example. This is from a couple weeks back. I did a training for some folks at the library, and they were talking about how they had quite a bit of the homeless population hanging out there, right? So they go there to apply for jobs, maybe sleep, just stay inside where it's air conditioned, right? And ways that kind of help them, prevent them from, getting in a sticky situation or being, lured in by a trafficker, because traffickers know that these people kind of have no other resource or option. Putting resources in the bathroom where it's private and discreet. No one wants to admit that they are being trafficked or they're in a situation. It can be embarrassing for some. So an example is putting a flyer like this on the bathroom stall, right, where they can pull that red piece of paper, give it to any staff member. So making sure that all the staff is informed of, if someone gives you a red piece of paper, what is the next step, and then helping that person privately. That's a great example. And also making sure it's in a different language. Not everyone speaks English here. Maybe have it in Spanish, or if you're noticing that in your community, there's a large German population, Middle Eastern population, having a different language for them. Making sure that your staff has resources on hand, a safety folder, safety plan of, if this happens, call this number. If we see that a woman is needing some sort of assistance, call the CCHT, right? Making sure that everyone is on the same page when it comes to those plans. Maybe passing out baggies with resources. If you have that capability of, resources for if you're being trafficked, sexually assaulted, domestic violence situation, having that all in a bag where it's discreet, also with some free swag. And the last one that was for the library folks, but maybe church at your library. One of the indicators that someone is being trafficked is sometimes that they don't have any sort of identification. Trafficker has taken their ID, their documents, everything. And we all know, first of all, it's a pain to go to the DMV. So you have to wait a couple hours to get your ID, and you have to have also the other documents, your social security card, whatever it is. So when you don't have any of those documents, it could be very challenging to get out of that situation. I mean, even if you want to go to the Salvation Army nowadays, you have to have an ID. So imagine not having any of those items. How on earth can you move on? How can you get out of that cycle? And trafficker knows that. So maybe having, an event where you can have the DMV folks come and they can help, do IDs there or whatever it is. I mean, there are many other things that you can do. Food bank, classes they can take. But those are a couple ways that you can kind of help those high-risk populations that we talked about earlier, right? What are we doing at the CCHT? We're doing these trainings. Like I said, knowledge is power. And I kind of use the example right now of COVID. I know, scary word. Is everyone going to get COVID? No. Is everyone susceptible of getting COVID? Yeah, right? So it's important that we educate everyone, every group, every population of what it is and how to protect ourselves and how to protect others. And that's what we do right now with these trainings, is we teach how to identify it, how to recognize it, how to respond to it, and provide those resources. So I kind of use that example. But that's what we're doing. We're doing these trainings. We're really just trying to debunk these myths and misconceptions and provide those resources of if you are seeing something, here's a way you can help. So here are our numbers from last year. We served over 200 survivors, or we had 200 survivors reach, excuse me. And then 90 survivors were served, and this is East Tennessee, by the way. And then we had over 3,000 unique services. This includes taking them to the therapist, hospital, court date, visitation to see their children. Any of those are considered our unique services that we offer. And then we trained over 5,000 community members, which is awesome. This year we're kind of behind because of COVID, but we're still training. We've done trainings for law enforcement, therapists, social work students, church members. I mean, anyone you can think of, we're training. And if we've not trained them, we will train them soon. We're even in the process of trying to train TSA at the airports. So it's important that everyone is on the same page and knows what to do. And lastly, we have 40 active community partners. These people help us out with resources, or maybe people that they know. I need to share that number is growing. So if you're wanting to be an active community partner, please let us know. We'd love to have you in our little loop, in our circle. Another thing that you can do is add us on our social media, add to be in the newsletter. So our social media and our newsletter, we put not only kind of our impact stories, which are great, so you can see what and how we help out our clients and our survivors, and the success stories. Sometimes we have articles that we think are really informative for the community to read, or videos or documentaries or podcasts. But we also have a warehouse on the second floor of our office, so that when our clients are ready to get out and move, and they have healed and they're growing, we have all the resources for them that they can furnish their house. So these are all through donations. So sometimes if we don't have a current item, we'll post on our social media, hey, we're looking for a black pair of slacks, size 8. One of our clients has a job interview, right? So those are a couple things that we post on our social media. And of course our events. So we always have some event going on. I know that we have something coming up in October. If you all want to partake in that, I can't tell you exactly because it's a secret. And lastly, trainings. So if you're wanting a more detailed in like your specific profession training, sign up for that. Our trainings are free. We do it via Zoom. We're also doing it in person. There are some, rules with doing it in person, but we're still doing it in person. And those are, ways that you can help out. Like I said, so the newsletter, social media, donations, and signing up for our trainings. These are important numbers that you should save in your phone. This issue needs to be addressed on the public health level. By tackling, human trafficking down and collaborating with different professions, we are really increasing our scope of our reach, because public health is concerned with the well-being of an entire populations and not just specific individuals. So we need to take preventative measures, and we can do this by effectively engaging with those those survivors to eradicate the socioeconomic causes excuse me, and consequences of human trafficking. So I think you all know at this point I've been saying it. This is an important issue that we need to address. Those numbers are great to have on your phone. If you have someone you know, or you have a suspicion that someone's being trafficked, call those top 2 numbers. The bottom number is our hotline. Maybe you have a friend or another nonprofit agency that needs a referral. Call us, 24-hour hotline number. And there's our website if you want to head to that. I just want to say lastly, our client success stories would not be possible if we didn't have our community. Our community involvement and passion has made it possible for our survivors to have a chance. I can't express how important community involvement is, not only to the agency, but to as public health issues. The community has to be involved. Donations have made our mission possible. That's why we do these trainings. It's hard to put all this information into an hour long, but we're wanting, again, to put this on everyone's radar and show that this isn't an issue for everybody, whether you're not personally affected or not. It's an issue that everyone needs to be concerned. I thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk today. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but we got to roll with the punches. If you all have any questions, comments, concerns, please email me at Rana, R-A-N-A, at ccht.org. or you can just go through our website and email our info account. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and please stay safe out there.
check. There we go. Check, check.
We're going to begin our Q&A session now, and I do encourage you to text any questions that you may have for Will and Katie from Raising a Voice, or for Raina Zachariah of Community Coalition Against Human Trafficking to the number on the screen, 865-816-0024. So we will relay the questions back and forth. Will and Katie will be able to answer live, and Raina will send her answers back when I text her your question in turn. So we'll start first with questions we have for Will and Katie. We have a question here. It says, how do you find in-house brothels?
Yes, so a lot of those we find out through just relationships with the women. I have relationships with people in the police force or at the jails, and so, but because our women have largely fallen out or have been failed by the systems, we also try to stay outside of the system and kind of help them enter back into it. But most of that information comes from the women themselves, and just they talk to us and they start kind of telling us about what's going on and where they're staying or where they work. And then that helps us because while on outreach, we never enter into properties or yards or things like that. A lot of times the women are just kind of out on the sidewalk or around cars, and we can stop by and say hey or drop off bags or give cards if there's people we haven't met before. And so it's just them telling us where they live and work most of the time.
Second question. Are many of the women that come to you, have they recently come out of incarceration?
It is mixed. I was just saying, actually, Thursday at the drop-in center, we did have 2 women come in for the first time, and both of them were recently exited prison, released from prison. And so that's something that we're seeing, I think, more of in maybe the last month. I don't know if that's just we've built relationships in new relationships and people are talking about us more, or something happened, but that has been a more recent addition that we've noticed on outreach and coming into the drop-in center.
What are trauma bonds? Thank you, Raina.
Thank you.
I'll get in touch with you if we've got another one for you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye-bye. This is a question for Katie and Will. You talk about manipulation. How do you deal with outright lying?
Usually it's it's harmless lying to us. Just they don't want to admit where they live or what they've done or things like that. But we have pretty strict rules. We don't give out cash, we don't give out money, we don't pay for hotels, we don't kind of put ourselves in position where we necessarily have to be like, you're lying, because they know they're lying, we know they're lying. We're trying to build some relationship so we can call it out in love and to kind of get them further down that path we talk about. But we just try to put rules into place that is just, it's hard and fast. Whether you're telling the truth or you're lying about your situation, this is what I can do for you. And so we just set it as kind of general rules across the board, whether you're dealing with me or with someone else or another woman. It's just, that's what we can do, and we don't bend those rules, no matter if you're coming from a really tragic past or if you're just telling me a really tragic story. We just stay true to the boundaries we've put in place.
Just checking my notes. Let's see. We would like to ask Will and Katie, there may be some interest in providing physical donations. You know, we are certainly encouraging any type of mission giving financially to help raising a voice in your mission. But the question was, if someone wanted to bring, say, clothing or personal hygiene items or things like that, where should they bring them, and when are you able to accept them? You know, business hours, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so you can bring them to our drop-in center, and the best thing to do would be to send an email to, you can send it to Katie, Katie, @raisingavoice.org, and I usually arrange it. I don't typically share the address of our drop-in center in situations like this where anyone can see it, but when you email me, I can tell you the address and we can arrange a time that works for both of us, or I am around, so if it's a lot of stuff, I can come to a church and pick it up if it's a group that's wanting to donate it, or you can send, we have an Amazon wish list as well, and that gets delivered to our Raising a Voice address. So.
What's the name of the Amazon wish list?
It is called RAV Drop-In Center Needs, and I can email that as well to you guys so it can be available.
Great. If you would let us know, we can share that with all of our audience, all of our United Methodist women. There is another question also for Will and Katie. And the comment was, really enjoyed the presentations today. And we were wondering, what nights on the weekend or during the week and what time do you go out for outreach?
Yeah, so we're going to change that periodically. The best way to stay involved generally with Raising a Voice and just stay informed is if you go to our website. You can subscribe to our newsletter. It's just raisingavoice.org. I think in the bottom right corner, you can type in your email to subscribe, and we'll send out a newsletter around the first of the month, each month, that'll give you a little link to sign up for our outreach. I believe we have one coming up this week on the 26th. So we'll kind of change sometimes the days. Sometimes it's a Friday, sometimes it's a Thursday, sometimes it's a Saturday. We're also, depending on the season of the year, going to change the time a little bit, largely in correlation to when it gets dark. So that's the best way to stay involved. But our next one is on the 26th at, is it 8:30? So.
I think part of the sense of that question was that if a group from a church wanted to come out and support you in that outreach, you know, how would we arrange that? And would you welcome that, or would that be too many people? Or how would you tell us to go about doing that?
Absolutely, yeah. We would love to host any groups that's willing to come out. just try to sign up. During COVID, we try to keep our groups around 5-ish people, just so, because our drop-in center, that's where we're all going to come meet. Essentially, the layout is we'll come basically for 30 minutes before we go on outreach, just to have some time of prayer, just also some time of, just giving some instructions on the bags, the cards, and kind of how to answer some, frequently asked questions when you're doing outreach. We'll go out for about an hour-ish, and then we'll come back and have a little session to debrief and kind of go over what you may have seen, heard, experienced. But yeah, we'd love to facilitate that. You can email Katie at raisingavoice.org. You can email me, Will, at raisingavoice.org, and we'd be happy to facilitate that.
I do encourage you, if you have questions, would you please forward them to by text message to 865-816-0024. We only have one other question right now, so we may be wrapping this Q&A session up very shortly. So I do encourage you to send your question in if you have any. This question also has to do with personal hygiene items. Are you all willing to accept like sample or hotel size personal hygiene items, or perhaps do you prefer them in case you need to fill a bag or something like that?
Yes, we try to only give out like travel size during our outreaches, just because we do put snacks and other stuff in there, so everything fits in the gallon bag. And we also take full size, but we typically use those in our own showers, or if a woman is moving into a new place or getting some sustainable housing, we do all full size stuff for her to take to that as well. So we take both, just different purposes.
What type of donations would you like in terms of snacks? Are you talking about packed crackers, individually packed items, that type of thing?
Yes, we do typically do individually things because we stick them in the bag, or they can take them, and then we try to buy in bulk, so things that will stay on the shelf, and if they take them, then they can keep them for a little bit as well. But we also give out produce and we try to promote healthy options as much as we can. I don't just try to give out bags of 100 bags of Doritos. And so we give out, if we get donations of produce, we go out during the week and we'll make sure it all gets handed out and used within time limits, obviously.
Just kind of on a side note, we're also working on a partnership to help with food insecurity in general. So that will be more so from a grocery standpoint, some of the food that they'll have the opportunity to cook and prepare. But the prepackaged stuff is very helpful for outreach, just to go put in the bag so that we have things to hand out. But kind of like what Katie said, we do try to promote healthy living. So that's kind of what the partnership will focus on, to help them not just with snacks, but more so with groceries, but also work with a couple of different community members to hand out produce, which they really love. So that's a great opportunity for us as well.
One question I did notice in your presentation, you mentioned your target audience. You assist women 18 years old and older. What if someone 16 comes into your drop-in center? Do you perhaps team with any other organizations that might be able to help a young woman who is under age 18?
So anytime we've not had the situation where we've dealt with a minor at our drop-in center at this point, but we have pretty strict policies and procedures on how to do that, which would be included in the training for volunteers that come during outreach or to the drop-in center. But anytime we engage a minor that says they're working in the sex industry, it's an immediate call to law enforcement so that we can get them the help that they need immediately.
Yeah, kind of like Will said, the adult women, it's much harder to prove that they are trafficked because of 1,000 reasons of not being able to prove that they're really being forced into this situation. But with minors, if they are in sex work, it's automatically trafficking. So we just go ahead. We don't let them leave the center. We're just very honest with them. But we call the hotline, the trafficking hotline, and local law enforcement, the people we know, and just get them automatically into that system, because they don't need to go back out. Anytime it's with kids, we take really serious and strict protocol.
Are there any questions from the few people we have here in the audience? The in-person audience? All right, at this time, I believe we've answered all the questions that have been offered. So I would really like to thank each member of the audience, and I hope that you will. Let me check one thing here. Okay, we're still good on this, but we do appreciate your attendance today for a time. The recording of today's presentations will be available, and you can get to that from the centralmethodist.com website, but we'll try to get that advertised out through our UMW channels. So thank you very much for your attendance, and this concludes today's program.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. And if there's any more questions, you can also email those to me at katie@raisingavoice.org if someone thinks of one later this afternoon.
All right, everyone, before we close in prayer, please remember that usually on our Social Action Day, we ask everyone to bring in commodities for groups. But this time, of course, we were not able to join together. So please remember to give to Raising a Voice with the P.O. Box that we mentioned before, which is P.O. Box 3544 in Knoxville. So you can send them donations, or we've already been talking about physical items. You can also donate to them. Also, please remember that Raina at the CCAHT, I'm sure she would appreciate everyone using their training materials, and also keeping in mind how you can contact them if there is an emergency situation. I'm sure both groups would appreciate your prayers, so please keep them in your prayers. I think we all need to thank Central United Methodist for being our host, our technicians here who have done a wonderful job, Becky and Alice for their hard work in putting this event together, because it was hard having to know what are we going to do because we could not meet in person. And we thank our speakers today also. So now in closing, let us bow our heads. Lord, again, we thank you for this day. Thank you for all that we learned. And please help us take what we learned and use it to help others, to spread the word how we can stop human trafficking. And also, let us start remembering that we are all children of God, and that all these people you see walking around, wherever you may be, they are your sisters and brothers. Start thinking about them in that way, and maybe the world will change for the better. Thank you, O Lord, for giving us voices to speak justice, hands to do your work, feet to travel to places where we can do the most good, and brains to know how to make things better. In Jesus'